Now here in our environment and on our machine dc.company.pri, we really only have a single domain controller, a single writable domain controller at least. And so I'll show you all the steps that lead up to the point where you go through cloning. The last part involves using your hypervisor tools to ultimately copy the disks, change the name of the machine, and then power on the VM to allow the cloning to occur. But I want to show you just a couple of PowerShell commands and the one group that are important to be aware of when it comes time to actually configure this machine to prepare it for cloning. That group first I want to show you here under Active Directory Users and Computers is right here, Clonable Domain Controllers. And so before you go about attempting to clone a DC, make sure that the object, the computer object for that machine exists in this group. I have it here, here's DC, so that we can move on to the very next step. The very next step here involves a pair of different commands that will validate those incompatible applications, potentially include them into that XML file that identifies those that are excluded, and then creates what's called a clone config file that's used the next time the machine reboots in order to facilitate that machine being cloned and the second copy of the Active Directory database now being available. So let's bring up an elevated command prompt here, a PowerShell prompt. And if I just clear the screen once again, let's go through these pair of PowerShell commands. The first is get ADDC cloning excluded application list. Now, when I hit the enter button here in a second, you're going to find a large list of those applications that are on a standard domain controller that have to be removed before it can be considered clonable. Now, this is a regular DC. I haven't really installed all that much to it, but you can see here just the long list of things that have to be removed before that domain controller can even be cloned. These are things like ADFS, certificate services, even DHCP is something that can't be on that machine. So you will have to ensure that all these things are removed, or you have to include all of these programs or services in that excluded application list. Now let me show you one way in which you can kind of speed that process up. There's another parameter here called generate XML, which allows you to specify a path, which should be a Windows NTDS. You want to throw that file in that folder because that's where the next command is going to be looking in order to find this XML file being created. I'll hit the enter button here, and that will go about creating the inclusion list and adding it to C Windows NTDS. Let me just go here now so we can take a look at the file we just created. So here's C, Windows, and then NTDS is down here. It's this custom DC clone allow list.xml, which is effectively everything that we just saw that was created by executing this command. Notice it's just the name and the type here of the items that exist on the list. This list needs to be present in that location because we need it in order to run the next command, which is new ADDC clone config file. This command will go through a series of 3 or 4 tests that ensure that this machine is ready for cloning. So we've got to make sure, number one, that it's in that the PDC FSMO role is available. We have to make sure that it's in the clonable domain controllers group. We have to make sure that there aren't any applications or services on this machine that either aren't allowed or that exist in that XML file that we created. And also that there aren't any existing clone configuration files already in that same location, that C Windows NTDS location, that we may perhaps have to overwrite. So you can see here that all the preliminary validation checks have passed, and now if we go back to that same location, so C Windows NTDS, we can then see the new XML file that was created. Now I do want to show you, however, that whereas this file as we've configured it now just really doesn't have that much in there, it's this command that we were working with before, this new ADDC clone config file, that has quite a bit more in terms of the parameters you can use with it. So let's take a look at the file or the command, and if I run a help on it, you can just see the large number of parameters that are associated with it. The point here is that when you use this command, you'll then want to change what the computer name is going to be, and also perhaps change the networking configuration for the machine that you're cloning to. Now, I just went through and typed in the command all by itself, so we're not really doing much in terms of making the necessary changes to actually create this cloned DC. If you should do this for actually cloning a domain controller in production, I would want to make sure I'd enter in things like what the IPv4 subnet mask and gateway and DNS resolver should be, what the site name should be for the new machine, what the new computer name might be as well. These could be all important to ensure that when this machine reboots after the cloning is complete, that it will then incorporate all those changes to create the DC that you're looking for.